Welcome to the Black Ship. This first part of the story you're about to hear involves Milcades in a fight scene with the Drazen. Please pause the video now and skip ahead to around 2 minutes in if you or anyone listening with you may be sensitive to this type of narrative. Cattle Ship, Eternal Garden. Milcades moved swiftly between 3 Drazen, dodging their desperate lashing vines easily. In a single fluid motion, his sword felled 2 of them, their bodies collapsing instantly. He turned to the third and delivered a powerful kick, sending it crashing into the wall with enough force to render it motionless, its bodysuit doing nothing to protect it against the Royal Marine captain. Without breaking his momentum, he pivoted before launching himself to the left, evading a plasma shot before putting 2 precise shots on the offending Drazen. The first depleted its shields, and the second claimed its life. Deactivating his sword, he tossed it down the hallway until, at the last moment, a Drazen appeared from a concealed position, just in time for the sword to impale it, killing it in the act. Rushing forth, Milcades jumped over a makeshift barricade only for him to down 2 Drazen, preparing to toss several grenades in an attempt to halt him, or just slow him down. He fired his pistol 3 times just as one of the Drazen activated a grenade. The grenade fell to the ground, and the Drazen, realizing what had happened, tried to scamper off. The unwounded Drazen, in a display of courage, tried to save its brethren by dragging it away. 2 seconds later, the grenade exploded, detonating the other grenades at their disposal and turning that section of the hallway into a grotesque painting of reds, browns, violets, and yellows mashed up together. "They're starting to use grenades. Be careful," he warned his fellow Royal Marines. No acknowledgement was needed in return. Thanks to his helmet and armor, the shockwaves created by the grenades did nothing more than disrupt the armor's sensors for a second or 2. Walking up to the impaled Drazen, he retrieved his sword, swinging it once to clear out the excess fluids clinging to it. Continuing on his path, he eliminated small pockets of Drazen with the utmost contempt. Finally, he reached his destination, the main entrance to the cattle pens. Doing a quick check on his map, he saw 3 of his 4 comrades already making their way to him. The 4th was finishing clearing out a small group of Drazen, and that would take him a few minutes before he could rejoin. "Should we advance without Varro?" asked a feminine voice all of a sudden. "Let's wait for him. He encountered the most resistance out of us all," Milcades replied, his voice firm and monotone. "Amalia, Levison, Galco, report. Eliminated 75 enemies. My sector has no more hostiles," Levison replied. 91 for me. Sector cleared. Suffered minor damage to my right shoulder. Nothing that can slow me down," Galco revealed without shame. 80. Most of them were young. Their desperation is growing," said Amalia. "Noted. I'll see you soon," Milcades said, before killing the link with his group and opening another with one of the teams fighting through the built-in ecosystem at the heart of the colossal ship. Immediately after making the connection, the faint sound of battle and explosions reached his ears. "Irving, report." "Captain," Irving replied, his breath heaving considerably. "Mantaro and I have coordinated the Marines and Auxilia in the push. The Drazen concentrated many of their veteran units here. They have been employing guerrilla tactics and their preferred ambush and wave assaults. We've suffered few casualties so far. The mercenaries under Commander Francesco Arcadi have proven themselves as capable fighters. Thanks to them, only a few Auxilia members have perished so far in the line of duty. No Marine has fallen yet despite how eager they are to prove their worth." Irving paused momentarily as a series of shots echoed around him. "With us providing heavy fire support and dealing with the most dangerous Drazen, our forces shall conquer these pastures within 2 hours at this pace. The Drazen have realized no reinforcements will come to their aid, but this has only driven them to savagery and suicidal desperation." "Most excellent. You make House Astor proud," Milcades replied. Again, no response was needed as he killed the link. Focusing on another group near the reactors of the ship, he opened the link. "Mirella, report." "Everything is in order, Captain. There were many Drazen, but few were soldiers or security personnel. Tearing them apart proved to be an easy task. They were trying to find a way to overload the reactors manually. We've replaced their AI programs and run times with our own. The ship isn't going anywhere without the approval of Her Highness," Mirella replied, letting out a soft chuckle. We couldn't have done it without your energetic interrogation methods, Captain. Let me ask you something, Milcades. Did you expect to encounter Drazen so soon again? Irrelevant. If anything, we were fortunate to obtain such a treasure trove of information that allowed us to achieve this victory, Milcades replied, and he heard a soft chuckle before the link died. A few seconds later, his three companions arrived in unison, coming to a halt before him. We wait for Varro. Until then, check your armor, your weapons, and shield charge. Way ahead of you, Captain, Galco said, holding his assault rifle tightly. How many more of them must we kill before they give up? Would you accept defeat in their place, knowing what that entails? Asked Levison. Not particularly, Galco replied with an edge of humor in voice. Most of these Drazen are a far cry of those we fought on Woodshaft, poorly organized and in fewer numbers than I expected. We'll probably finish scouring the ship in 2 days instead of weeks, Amalia pointed out. We're lucky we got to face chaff instead of their trained and seasoned. And with most of them trapped in sealed bulkheads and decks, we can pick them apart one by one, vent those sections, or let them starve, added Levison, without a single shred of empathy. How many Drazen are on board? Currently, 50,000 of them, though most of those are civilians according to the translators. This ship was carrying 400,000 of them. Where are the rest? Asked Amalia, though she already knew the answer. They must be paying hell down on the planet. They really were trying to take the planet as quickly as possible. They almost emptied their armor, heavy weapons, and logistical supplies from the storage bays. Filthy rebels or not, it is commendable that they can put up a fight against a Drazen invasion force, commented Galco. Until we can establish communications with the planet, everything else is secondary, Milcades said, joining the conversation. Captain, do you believe the Drazen will keep using human shields? Asked Levison. We've isolated them entirely from one another. They can't organize themselves effectively anymore, meaning they can't know what's effective and what isn't against us, Milcades answered, pausing as he finished. If they hope for hesitation, they'll find none. What if they kill their cattle out of spite? There are over 5 million listed cattle on the records. How many of those are just animals and not people? Asked Amalia as she ignited her sword for a split second. All the more reason to fulfill Her Majesty's orders, Milcades said. The more we save, the easier it'll be for her to sleep soundly. Amalia let out a guttural growl. Detestable monsters. To them, we are monsters, replied Levison, holstering his pistol. They are right to fear us, but if we are monsters, what would Cynthia be to them? An eldritch abomination or a demon? Good. I hope they die in fear, Galco added, snickering darkly. Turning his head slightly to his left, he saw their final companion arrive. Ah, here comes Varro. What took you so long? Apologies. Those Drazen proved to be more stubborn than others. On that note, Captain, the processing area is secured and free of hostiles, Varro explained, his voice sounding firmer and heavier than the others. You have nothing to prove by taking the largest objective, Varro, Milcades replied. I know, Captain. It is my personal repentance, if you will. Folks died in Woodshaft due to my negligence. I promised I would honor him by killing as many of these monsters as possible, Varro replied. Then we're in luck, Varro, for there are thousands more to carve through, said Amalia as she placed a hand on his shoulder. Varro returned the gesture in kind, and both nodded simultaneously. We're ready, Captain. Then let us not delay any further, Milcades agreed, and they all turned to the reinforced blast doors blocking their path. Wires came out of Milcades' bracer and connected with the panel next to the doors. Take positions, he commanded, and instantly Varro and Amalia took point while Levison and Galco stood at each side of the doors, ready to strike from their unseen positions. With a groan of metal, the doors parted in the middle and slid into the walls themselves, offering a free passage to a long, lonely corridor. Milcades disconnected from the panel and took the lead. Their walk was measured and ever ready to counter any unaccounted surprise. Once they reached the other end of the corridor, Milcades connected with another panel, and a few seconds later, the door slid open to reveal a huge area that made a cruel parody between a prison and a barn. It had only one entry and exit point, heavily discouraging the very idea of trying to escape, even if any of the captives could even get out of their cages. There were also several lifts but no stairs, since the Drazen found them frustrating to use. The entire section was large, housing at least 3 stories of cages built into reinforced walls. It was sickening how well organized and structured everything was from the point of a truly alien mind. "Go," Milcades ordered with a thought, and his companions rushed forth, weapons at the ready. But to their shock and surprise, not a single Drazan was there to oppose them. As they moved, shuffling noises began to emerge from the containment cells, soon followed by voices and cries of rejoicing. The captain observed the captured men and women in detail. All of them were fit, or at least had a healthy body, but none looked to be past 50 years old in the case of the oldest ones present. He also couldn't see any cybernetic limb or any cripple, for that matter. They were also naked, all of them, but it was more than apparent that their own nakedness mattered little to them now. Some were crying happily, others were kneeling, begging to be rescued, and a few were silent, glaring at them. "Milcades, every cell has at most 12 prisoners," Galco pointed out. "I don't see another point of entry or exit. There are 180 cells. These can't possibly be the cattle pens." "Then let's find out," Milcades replied, looking around until he found a man in his late 30s, looking at them intently, but bereft of adoration or anger. Approaching the man, Milcades activated his speakers. "You there, answer me. What is this place?" "Isn't it obvious? This is a cattle pen, Royal Marine," the man replied, standing up from his sitting position to be closer to Milcades' eye level. "You're not a pirate. I don't see any mark on you." "Who are you?" Milcades asked, pressing on. The man scoffed darkly. "Who I am doesn't matter. Not anymore. I'm not an Aster lapdog. I'm a free man, or rather I was. Ironic, isn't it? I was but a child when the Great Revolution happened. The shackles that our noble overlords set around our necks were destroyed by the mighty Geraldo Onrasta." "Again," he scoffed. "Not that it matters anymore. Cursed be Gustav Onraste. His ambitions turned into our undoing." Milcades took a step forth, unmoved by the man's shattered spirit. "A rebel, then. Tell me, what is it that you know and why are you here?" "Why I'm here is simple, Royal Marine. I was captured by those Xenos when they turned against us. At the time, I thought I was one of the lucky ones. I got captured and survived their selection process. Lucky are those who died and were turned into whatever is that they eat. I've been here ever since. Now that you're here, I understand why the ship went so silent and why the damn Xenos left us here to die," the man replied with a sad, distant smile. "The things I've seen them do, they treat us like mere animals." "I doubt they require you for manual labor," Milcades replied. The man chuckled. "The ones at the bottom floor are the youngest here, but no children. They were sent to some other place, I think. I'm not sure how many of them survived. Regardless, the bottom floor was reserved for designated breeders. We don't know what they do to the ones on the middle floor. They just take a few each time, and sometimes a few are returned. The ones that return say they do some tests, and the ones that pass are sent elsewhere. We at the top are future meals." "Ah, so that's what those other unmarked zones are. Clever bastards. They divide their cattle into different segments, putting them in different areas to avoid cooperation," Levison said through their private channel. Milcades inspected him from top to bottom, comparing him and other prisoners to the dead cattle he found on the disabled destroyer back on Gintrax. There were a few recent wounds, cuts, and burn marks, but nothing that could endanger his life. "Were they trying to tame you?" "More like break us," the man replied, his eyes marred with pain. "Most break bad. I've only been here for, I don't know, a month, 2? There's no way to keep track of time. But there are people who have been here for years. Years. Either you behave or they make you behave. The violent ones are made stupid and complying, and the kids born here, feral. Absolutely feral. I can't describe those children as human. They were raised like animals and behave as such." "I see," Milcades replied and turned to leave. Hey, aren't you going to free us?" asked a woman next to the apathetic man. "Let us out!" another demanded. "I want to see my family again!" one cried out. The cries and demands for rescue continued for several moments until a shot was fired, silencing the tumultuous chaos. Holstering his pistol, Milcades exclaimed loudly, "You're mistaken if you believe we've come to rescue you. Most of you bear pirate markings. That alone sentences you to death. The rest are rebels, traitors of the highest order. I have not heard a single one of you proclaim your loyalty to the principality. However, we will not leave you to suffer and die. Once we cleanse the remaining Drazen threat, your lives will be at the mercy of Her Majesty Princess Clara Astor. Know that it is through her will alone that the Drazen have been stopped." With that said, the Royal Marines made their way out of the pens and back the way they came from. After a few seconds of silence, Amalia spoke up. "The cells were spacious, though they didn't offer any privacy. What do you think they're forced to eat?" "Judging by the dispensers on the walls, some sort of gruel," replied Galco. "Say what you will about the Drazen, but none of them seem to be underfed or starved. I don't know if that's worse or a relief." "Wouldn't you want your cattle to be healthy, tastier?" asked Levison. "The Drazen are crafty, I'll admit that much. But that makes their actions all the more disgusting. They know we're sapients. Why else would they go to such extremes to isolate pockets of their cattle until they're ready to eat or completely tamed? Monsters! All of them!" Varro exclaimed angrily. "Then we must move to our next objective." "Wait! What is this?" Milcades said, and he focused on his map. Near the second hangar, a large group of Drazen was moving toward it. "They're trying to board their remaining 2 docked frigates," proclaimed Levison. "Captain Killa's group is nearby." "Let me contact Her Highness. She foresaw such an eventuality," Milcades replied, and within moments he established a link with his princess. "What is it, Milcades?" Clara asked. "A group of Drazen are trying to reach their docked frigates. Judging from their trajectory, they all came from the areas marked as nurseries. We've yet to reach them," replied the captain. "Are there any of your men close by?" "A triad, my princess. Shall I command them to intercept?" "No. Order them to pursue them but never catch them. Make them run faster. Let them know fear. Ensure that they can't overload their reactors but do nothing else. I will suffer martyrs none. Allow them to flee," Clara ordered, and paused briefly. "I'll have Redford destroy one of them while the other shall valiantly escape." "As you command, my princess," Milcades replied without objection. A second later, Clara ended their link. Passing on the orders, he and his comrades began to move again. There were many more Drazen to kill before the cattle ship was successfully claimed. Navio, bridge. "Understood, my princess. It shall be as you command," Redford replied before the link with Clara died. Almost as easily as moving his fingers, the starboard railguns moved, aiming at the cattle ship, ready to follow his orders. As he sat on his chair, Redford relaxed as much as he could. Nearly 3 hours had passed since the boarding of the cattle ship, but time had passed glacially slowly and terrifyingly fast at the same time. The damages the Navio sustained were more extensive than initially registered. Fortunately, that damage could be easily repaired. The casualties had been thankfully few, with only 67 in total. Most of them commoners and only 7 nobles, all members of the logistical, support, and general staff. Sadly, among the casualties, an entire hydroponic bay was lost alongside the personnel responsible for keeping it operational. Entire decks and sections were now closed off, mainly those near the heavily damaged areas exposed to the vacuum. Their radiators had also suffered minor damage, further slowing the process of reducing the ship's heat. To add further problems to their precarious position, their shields wouldn't return for several hours yet. Their total missile ammunition was nearly depleted. They had only 1 torpedo left, and their maneuvering capabilities were currently hindered. But for every problem, there was a saving grace. He still didn't trust the pirate younglings Clara had, more or less, adopted under her care. What exactly was her objective, he didn't know. However, after receiving Salazar Reed's report that they wanted to help and seeing them in action, he could see some value in them. The simple fact that they had saved many lives and had used their nascent pirating skills to open their way through dangerous situations proved to be useful. Salazar Reed, surprisingly, joined in the rescue efforts, leading the rowdy teenagers into action and guiding them. Several of them suffered minor injuries, and one particularly brave child crawled through a vent, rupturing his suit and earning several burns all over his body. But the boy didn't quit, not until he was able to seal off a plasma vent and rescue over 50 trapped crew members. He was in the medical bay, his wounds being treated. For that alone, Redford hoped for the kid's survival. He hated pirates almost as much as Wyatt hated the Drazen, but doing something like that made him tolerate the ones on board a little more. His opinion on pirates would never get better. They were deplorable and opportunistic criminals at best, and filthy, bloodthirsty butcherers and slavers at worst. But now he was starting to believe that a bullet to the head or a sword to their necks weren't the only solutions at hand, at least not for all of them. "Commander," Galt called out, breaking Redford's line of thought, "our fighters have been re-equipped. Our technicians report that 8 of our fighters won't be available for another deployment until emergency repairs are completed. That brings our total number of available fighters to 46. With our minor surplus in pilots, we can rotate the ones who are exhausted." "See to it. How are the composters?" he asked, his tone serious despite the tiny smirk on his lips. Who in their right mind would give such a lowly, disgraceful name to anything? It was dreadful and refreshing at the same time. "Ready to redeploy at your behest, Commander," Galt replied. "Most excellent. I'm afraid we'll need every available fighter again soon," Redford commented and shifted his focus to the 2 Drazan destroyers. They were firing missiles at their invisible targets, and only a few seconds later, he could finally confirm they were there. They were still invisible to his sensors, but as they fired intercepting missiles, a quick vector calculation on the point of origin revealed them completely. It was hard to follow the action, thanks to the slight delay given the vast distances separating them, but Redford could manage it. With the ship's sensors, he saw missile signatures disappear one after the other, but only a few hit their target. As expected, the corvettes formed around their flagship, providing a screen of protection while returning fire with a ceaseless barrage of Hawk missiles. The destroyer itself aided in that task. Sudden spikes on its signature revealed it had railguns at their disposal, though he wondered if they were equivalent to the Noir Navios or inferior. The traitors were using the same formation they had used when they ambushed them on Gintrax. The corvettes were fast and nippy for their size, showcasing their superior engineering and construction, but they were wasted on a defensive action. The Drazan, in contrast, were quick to adjust their assault by focusing on a single corvette. The number of missiles increased on both sides, but it was evident that the corvette was getting struck repeatedly. Finally, after several minutes of fruitless exchange, the gap was closed with the nearest Drazan destroyer. A sudden spike in power detection was the only warning he received before the targeted corvette vanished from sensors a few moments later. The Drazan had taken the first kill, and their resolve was emboldened with it. The traitor fleet shifted their focus and formation, allowing the corvettes to swarm around the Drazan ship while their light destroyer pummeled its shields with its railguns. Just then, active signatures of fighters appeared near the Drazan destroyer while its brethren moved in to support it. As he watched, he received an alert coming from the cattle ship. Splitting his focus, he saw 2 frigates, their last remaining from the original 8 the mobile habitat had brought with it. Following Clara's command, Redford waited until the frigates were burning away as quickly as they could manage away from the cattle ship and, more importantly, away from the Noir Navio. Calculating the trajectory of the frigate on the left, Redford fired the starboard railguns 4 times, once every 5 seconds, and slightly adjusted their angle of fire. Half a minute later, after the initial volley, the first wave impacted the frigate. Its shield flared up, nearly breaking them in an instant. The second wave missed 1 shot, but the other punctured its shields, shattering it. The third round cleaved right through its midsection, and the fourth wave destroyed its thrusters, crippling it completely. Redford then adjusted for the other frigate and fired, but only twice, intending to miss it entirely. His duty fulfilled, the aged commander focused on the traitors and the Drazan destroyers. The battle had changed very little, but it was more than clear that the destroyer was being overwhelmed, with the fighters likely eliminating its PD turrets before moving in to plant haywire or tactical mines. But the Drazan were fighting for all they were worth. The destroyer, probably knowing its time was at an end, charged forth against the traitor flagship, firing its weapons at it. The other destroyer took that chance to focus on a corvette that had moved too far away from the others. It didn't take long for its signal to be lost, another ship silenced. The first destroyer was out for blood, uncaring of its own survival, and that was its downfall. He didn't know how much damage it delivered upon the traitor flagship, but it wasn't enough to cripple it or deter it away from combat. A series of explosions caused by tactical mines took it down, and with a matching explosion that would illuminate the void with the flash of a star, the first Drazan destroyer was brought down. As the traitor fleet prepared to face against the second one, the destroyer suddenly changed its trajectory away from the traitors. The surviving 3 corvettes gave chase for 5 minutes, firing only a few missiles at a time. What he thought at first to be a tactical maneuver from the Drazan was revealed for what it was moments later. They were running away. 2 minutes later, the traitors achieved the same conclusion as the corvettes broke pursuit, changing their vector trajectories to the Nornavio. Their intentions were clear and loud for all to hear. Closing his eyes, the aged commander took a deep breath, steadying himself to engage in an inevitable fight. "We'll move closer to the cattle ship and hide under its sensor shadow. That'll give us some time," he said as the Nornavio began to move slowly at his command. "If they intend to—" His words died in his throat when suddenly he detected an open communication across all channels. For a moment, he suspected a cyber warfare trap. But if that was the case, it wouldn't be so blatant, and he was more than confident that the Nornavio could easily counter any such attempt. Patching it through, the voice of Felicity Centaur came to life. "Gallant venture, Bridge." "Damage report," Casimir ordered. "We've suffered minor damage across our hull. Our shields managed to hold on and rest at 23% barely. The Invigilata and the Heart of Honor were lost with all hands. The Glorious Reclamation, Tamarin's Finest, and Legion of Virtue report negligible damage across their hulls but significant shield depletion, my Lord Casimir." Captain Ciro, the robust, strong, bearded man, replied from the captain's chair. "It seems even these monstrous aliens know better than to face annihilation at our hands," Felicity, clad in tight-fitting and heavily ornate armor, proclaimed proudly. "Are you certain they fled due to our prowess and not out of desperation? We lost 2 ships, Felicity, 2. Over 1,000 lives were lost needlessly. Replacing the commoners will be of no matter but those of noble blood. They died as heroes and loyal servants of his Lord Regent. Their houses will be proud and honored," Felicity countered, smiling. "Maximilian, report." "We took down their destroyer, but we lost 7 fighters in the process. 2 more were heavily damaged and must return, from 60 to 51. Even without fighters, the Drazan are menaces not to be trifled with," he said, proudly showcasing his admonishment. "The other destroyer has fled, and we have ample room to deal with the Samuel's glory, as you soon shall see, Maximilian," Felicity proclaimed eagerly. "Captain Ciro, open an unencrypted wide-range communication across all channels. I want everyone in this wretched system to hear." Casimir glared at her, but couldn't go against her decision, not without inflicting great shame upon his house's name and his father's reputation and honor. Only the glory that a Drazan destroyer had been expunged from the principality salved his inner protests. "It is done, Lady Felicity, awaiting your command to start transmitting," Ciro said a few moments later. "Well done, Captain. Now, Casimir, if you will," Felicity said, smiling coquettishly at the Caiston. Casimir stepped forth, clearing his throat. With a glance at the captain, he began to recite the surrender demand he and Felicity had crafted mere hours ago. It wasn't elegant, far from it, but it was what she wanted. "Attention, Samuel's glory! I am Casimir Caiston, son of Andrew Caiston, grandson of Tamirin Caiston. Under the authority of his Lord Regent, Duke Cornelius Draymore of Camrim, the Hammer of Draymore, Knight Undefeated, Protector of the Principality, the Arabian Vanquisher, and Hand of Justice, I demand the immediate and unconditional surrender of her royal whore, the Reaper of Nobles, the Unquenchable Harlot, the Famine Drinker, the Blight of Astor, the Ruination of Sanity." He paused for a moment, only to see the wide, fulfilled grin plastered all over Felicity's face. "You may know this vile vermin, this repugnant plague-carrying rat, this phlegm cast upon the tapestry of our most beloved principality as the second Princess Clara Astor. As we speak, our fleet is moving against you. There will be no escape unless you surrender this amalgamation of rot, evil, and devious lies onto my hands for custody. Refuse, and all of you will perish. Your vessel is wounded, and we are faster. You cannot engage us in a direct confrontation. You no longer have the capacity. We'll continue to assault your vessel with missiles until your obliteration is the final result. There is no victory for you here." With another short pause, Felicity gave him an approving nod. "Relinquish the creature, for I refuse to speak her name again for fear of winding my tongue or die. These are your options. As we approach, you may escape onto the planet and find whatever refuge there is. Should the motherless beast descend with you, you will find no mercy freely given. Surrender her alive or just her head, and you shall be offered a pardon, for the glory of the principality, for the rightful rule of his Lord Regent. The hammer of Draymore is strong," he shouted, pressing a fist against his chest for extra effect even though it wasn't necessary. "Transmission ended and recorded. Shall I put it on a loop?" Ciro asked a few seconds later. "Do so," Felicity replied, satisfied. "Your prose and ability to weigh your words is exceptional, Casimir, far better than I could have done so. You have my most sincere admiration. You know they won't hand her over, right? And if they try, we'll receive Royal Marines and Cynthia Winfield instead. Then we'll be dead," Casimir proclaimed as he stared intently at the black-haired woman. Felicity shook her head slowly. "My dear Casimir, do you take me for a fool? I do not expect them even to consider our demands. Likewise, I have no intention of letting the Reaper live past this day. She will die, and her demise will move the false prince into action and rid his Lord Regent of her most odious, miscreant, loathsome, and unsavory existence. She may be his niece, but she's decided to stand against him. For that alone, her death will be the prize we shall present to his lordship. The hammer of Draymore is strong. And if they do, preposterous as the idea is, surrender her," Casimir asked, eyes narrowing. "They are traitors to the principality, Casimir," replied Felicity, her smile never faltering. "I see," Casimir said, crossing his arms. "Nornavio, hangar." Everyone across the Nornavio had heard the transmission, and for its entire duration, no one moved or breathed. No one had the courage. That hadn't been a surrender demand. It had been a most hateful, spiteful insult if there ever was one. A personal attack directed at the purple-eyed woman who commanded their ship and stood above all of them. An Aster princess had been maligned and humiliated deeply, promising nothing but death. The question in everyone's mind was, how would the infamous Reaper reply? That alone was enough to freeze their blood. Except for one particular pilot standing next to his fighter, his fists shaking while a cold inferno raged within him. "Casimir Caiston," Wyatt muttered, his voice echoing a deep, profound, gnawing hatred born from the bottom of his soul. Unnoticed, everyone around him stepped back, unnerved by his hollow, empty gaze. Wyatt Staples turned to his fighter and climbed into the cockpit. There was a blue blood he needed to hunt.